Okay, so a couple of years ago, I visited London, gave a speech, and met up with a bunch of SEOs who I've known since the early 2000s and never met in person. I knew them from forums. There were a lot of popular SEO forums, and everybody had avatars and uh, usernames that weren't their own names. So we didn't know each other by name. We didn't know what each other looked like, but it was nice to meet everybody, and that was sort of a in real life experience. So when we've been using Google as SEOs, we often did it at first by knowing what the URL for Google was, and when it came to visit it, we used log files to identify Google visiting our pages and rummaging around, going from link to link, indexing them as we hoped, and finding all the redirects and finding everything that we wanted indexed and making sure it got indexed. So that was sort of the life of an SEO. Uh, and I titled this presentation Google IRL, or Google in Real Life, because I've seen a couple of videos that were kind of funny that were titled that too, but it's not quite the same thing. I was thinking about Google creating a presence in the real world and affecting data, counting things that we maybe didn't anticipate at this point. And I'm seeing more and more of that. I don't know how to prompt you to advance the slide, but let's move on to the next one. Okay, it looks like maybe I can do it. So Google does index the physical world, and I'm going to focus on at least 3 different patents. There are a few more mixed in there, but they're showing examples of Google taking that real world objects like they described in 2012's knowledge graph, and are trying to help us get a grasp on reality, the world around us. One of them has to do with what they refer to as brand recognition or brand penetration. They're noticing in images, sometimes images that they take, sometimes images that they're sent, things like targeted advertisements. They're noticing brands in those. And if you've had a chance to use something like Google Lens, you know that it's really good at identifying logos and doing object recognition. That's part of its purpose. I use it sometimes to take photographs of plants that I don't know. I'm been in California for 5 years. I'm still learning about all the native plants here. I have a garden of potted plants in my front and back patios where I'm growing some to learn more about them. But sometimes you need help when you're dealing with something new in terms of how to treat it, what type of pesticides to use, how often to water it, what happens when the leaves start turning yellow instead of green, and so on. And Google is really helpful for that. It's helps with more than just brands, but the focus of this patent was on brands and identifying brands in specific geographic locations. So they included a flow chart in there that talked about how they were identifying stuff in images. So one of the things that they look at are street views, and they have 360-degree cameras on these street view cars. So they capture a lot of information about the world around them. They take lots of photographs of things like storefronts. So imagine driving through a parking lot and looking at all the locations of all the vehicles. I lived in Delaware for a few years, which is one of the smallest states in the country. And most of the license plates on cars weren't from Delaware. They were from Pennsylvania or Maryland. I live in California now, and it's very rare that I see a license plate other than California. I saw Texas a couple of days ago, and that was a little bit of a surprise, but not too much, because I can imagine somebody driving from Texas to California. But imagine Google collecting all this brand information and tracking locations of things, knowing what types of things were sold in different types of stores. And this goes way beyond what we imagine from Googlebot indexing the web. Google indexing reality. the world around us, the streets, the cars, the vehicles, the brands, different types of brands. And they're counting them and collecting them and seeing what sells in certain areas and what doesn't. They're looking at if you go to an image gallery like a Flickr, there's Exif data associated with images that Google can read, and they can identify where certain pictures were taken, which gives them a grasp of a lot of information about a lot of things. They can recognize text and images. When we used to do SEO for local search, we used to tell site owners to use text to write out their images, and Google would use data wrappers to identify postal code information about locations. And that's how they would find things out. At this point, we now see Google's doing optical character recognition on images to identify what's being shown in those pictures. And if you search, do a reverse image search in Google, you'll sometimes see photographs with lots of text on it, and the text is often related to what you did the reverse image search for. So they're spending, it's a matter of spending time and money. The computational expense of doing optical character recognition is something they've been doing more recently than they used to. They didn't used to do that as much. So they're looking at Exif data. They're looking at image databases, street view images, and target advertisements. And this is maybe getting a better grasp of reality in real life. Google's capturing the things around us. And when they make something like Lens that's capable of recognizing entities in images and doing object recognition, they're really adding a lot of information to their own knowledge graph. They're collecting information about the world with. So Google does do object recognition just like they do optical character recognition. They recognize the shapes of things. They collect templates of certain types of objects, and they can use those templates to recognize things in photographs rather quickly. They have a patent that they talk about doing that with, where they're talking about replacing knowledge graphs with what they're learning from images. In this one, they talk about grizzly bears, and grizzly bears spend a lot of time hunting, and they often hunt in the middle of rivers, and they hunt for fish. So Google does a character recognition. They look at templates of main objects like bears or related objects like fish, and they can tell a lot from pictures. You know, you can see who the entities are in those pictures. They've done knowledge graph. A graph is an entity, is a node, and a line between entities is an edge. And the direction of those edges is part of a graph. And that's how they can tell how things might be related to each other, because they often have similar graphs. But Google is also looking, if you do a reverse image search, you'll see that there are categories related to images, and the categories differ depending on what your image, what your query might be. If you say, for instance, search for presidents in the United States and you look for different presidents, you'll see different things. You search for John F. Kennedy, you'll see a list of categories related to his assassination in Dallas, Jackie O, his wife, and a lot of other things that happened during his time. You do a search for Donald Trump, you'll see events related to his presidency, and they'll talk about Time magazine covers, because there are a couple of famous caricatures of him on Time magazine, and they call attention to these pictures. Also, Google's learning about the world and about facts from the world from pictures that are uploaded to the web. For instance, there's photographs of Michael Jordan in a Bulls uniform. So this way, they've got proof that Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls. They're analyzing images to learn about the world. They're no longer relying upon knowledge bases. When you can show somebody like Michael Jordan in a Bulls uniform, that's pretty good proof that he played for the Bulls. So these categories in reverse image search are semantically known as being in ontologies. They're hierarchies that are, we often see there's some type of connection between the place. Say, for instance, I do a search for Carlsbad, California, where I live, and there are photographs of places like Legoland or the beach, which are parts of Carlsbad. So you know those entities exist within Carlsbad, and it's an ontology of all the entities that are in the area. And Google's looking at things like Exif data and GPS information from the device that took those pictures, or maybe uploaded them. So Google knows where you are and can take action based upon that location. And I found a couple of patents that were related to that I thought were really interesting. It's okay. So Google has a patent on location history, where Google can, if you turn the location history tracker on your phone, Google can help you navigate from place to place. And you tend to leave the GPS on when you're going around about your day. So Google knows where you are most of the time. I went to a business near the beach and took a picture of the sunset. And within minutes, Google had sent me a notice saying, we noticed you're at such and such a business and you took a photograph. Would you like to upload that to Google Maps? I didn't think it was a good idea to just upload a random sunset. So I said no, but Google knew where I was at. I've also been in the consignment store, and Google thought I was at the fitness center next door to it, and it asked me to upload a picture of that. And again, I told it no, but Google's trying, and they tend to get really close with GPS to knowing where you're at. And they often send me information asking me to update my location history, where they'll sometimes tell me my address is home, and then a few minutes later tell me my address is work. And my commute, they don't quite have a grasp on that yet. It's a good 3-foot commute. But Google thinks that home and work are both the same place. They acquired a company a few years ago called ZipDash. And when they acquired ZipDash, it gave them the chance to add information to traffic that they monitored using navigation devices. They can track all the cars with all their GPSs turned on and see if they're traveling in certain speeds or if they're slowing down or speeding up. And I like using Google Maps when I'm traveling on freeways, because it'll tell me whether there are delays on those roads and how long the delays are. It'll say something like, there's a 5-minute delay due to an accident ahead. It should only slow you down for a few minutes. So you're on the fastest route, keep on moving. Find that's useful. It's helpful knowing that. So that's Google in real life again, affecting how I travel. There are also knowledge panels for places, local business entities along the web. And one of the things that those have in them often is a busyness counter, which tells you how busy or how slow that location might be at the time you're planning to visit. And that's really useful in case you're going to someplace like a grocery store or something that everybody else is going to at the same time. I remember on the East Coast when there was a storm forecast. Everyone would rush to the stores and buy milk and bread. And it's no fun getting stuck in line when a storm's coming. So plan ahead for those things if you can. But it's good when you're using something like this for a place like a hair salon or so on, and you want to see how busy it is before you go. Another patent from Google was about quality visit scores. And they, okay, this is a slightly different one. This is Google telling you, recommending photogenic places to visit, where Google Now will tell you, if you ask where there's a good photogenic place, Google will give you directions to a place to take photographs. So if you're visiting somewhere and you want photographs of landmarks, it's something to ask your phone. Where can I go take some good photogenic pictures? And Google will have recommendations for you. And I've tried it. It's helpful. There used to be, I used to live in Cardiff, California. There's a statue right by the beach of a guy on a surfboard referred to as the Cardiff Kook. And people dress it up in costumes, usually different times of the year, like when somebody's going to graduate, and they'll hang stuff on it and they'll put signs up and say congratulations on your graduation, things like that. So I took a walk to the Kook and I asked Google if Google knew what was the statue in front of me. It had no idea. It didn't give me an answer. But this patent said Google's working on recognizing locations that you ask questions about, where points of interest, landmarks, might be. And this was one of those I thought would be worth trying. The patent also said, imagine you go to a foreign city, one where you don't understand the language. You're looking for a place to eat. You find a restaurant that looks interesting. You want to find English language reviews of that restaurant. You get your phone out. You tell Google, what is the name of this place? It can translate signs for you. You can ask it to give you reviews of that restaurant, and Google can give you reviews. You can ask to see the menu and get a translation of the menu. And these are very useful things if you're a business traveler. Being able to search by a location in addition to by photograph, which is what you do with the Google Lens, that can be really useful. That's another in real life aspect of Google that we want to all see more of, because I think people ought to know when they come across a karth kook what the heck it is. And that's my presentation for today. I'm looking forward to questions.
Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for the presentation. And it's really a privilege to see you here in Digital Zone. It means a lot to us. Thank you so much personally and for Zeo Agency.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. We have many questions, to be honest. I can read them for you if you like.
That would be great.
Of course. David asked, hi, Bill. Do you think Google might be able to parse and index talk radio? Yes.
Hi, David. I know Google's trying to get more audio, and they're trying to index things like podcasts. They just started adding knowledge graphs for podcasts, which they hadn't been doing before. I also worked with a client who unfortunately didn't survive COVID. They went out of business, but they had been on NPR and with 9 million listeners a week, involving stock market and trading. And they had these podcasts on their website, and I had them transcribe them. And they got lots of traffic once they transcribed them, because people wanted to know the latest financial news. So having talk radio indexed is a great thing. Sometimes you've got to help it along by doing things like putting those videos online and putting transcripts online so Google can index them easy.
Okay, thank you. Next questions from Okan. Do you have any resources or a must-read document to start with to help us to understand semantic SEO? I am sure you have read hundreds of articles, but as a start or to help us understand the semantic topic, resources or your advices would be great. Thank you.
It's tough trying to point out a specific resource because there's not necessarily a good one. Actually, there's a lot of hidden resources. It's like the second patent that I found at Google after PageRank was one from Sergey Brin, where he talked about a DIPRI algorithm, which identified books. And he was collecting information about books. He came up with a list of 5 different books written by different people, published by different people, and told the crawler, if you come across a site that contains all 5 of these books that contain this type of information about books, copy all the information from all the books. And this was 1999. I guess at some point there were dreams in somebody's head of being another Amazon. I don't know. But the first knowledge graphs at Google were based on books, and the first patent about rich results was one on books. It described how rich results could be formed from those. They did two continuation patents on the book patent, where the third one, they finally gave up the books and they said, we can create rich results for anything. And Google had published in the Google blog in 2009 something from Ramanathan Guha, which talked about rich results. And they didn't come up with the patents that expanded the books thing until like 2015. So sometimes they're slow giving out that information.
Yeah. Thank you. Here's the next question for you from Samet. Hi, Bill. Do you think Google definitely use Exif Information, especially in the local news results?
It's hard to tell how much they're using it. Again, this is a question of computational expense. How much effort are they taking? Are they using optical character recognition? They've grown to use more of it. At this point, if I was working on a business website and trying to get to rank well for local search, I'd still insist upon using the address and writing it out in text instead of relying upon a picture of it. Like a photograph that might show the address and the business name on the front door or something. I wouldn't rely just on that. I'd have them put the full address on the page. With Exif data, I know they're going to places like Flickr and harvesting as much information as they can. And it's not just object recognition and telling what's in the photographs. It's also that data. Exif data can give them lots of information. That's how they're determining what are good sources for image recommendations, for photographic recommendations.
Thank you. So next question from Mert.
Yeah.
Bill, thank you so much for your visionary presentation. Google understands everything. How should SEOs change their strategies with MOM update? If you had just one golden tip, what would it be?
Okay, so MOM is sort of similar to some of the stuff people have been doing for semantic search when they collect key value pairs, when they collect entity information, when they they include facts about specific entities. Part of semantics means providing information about how something is composed, what its parts are, what facts are associated with it, who's married to who, who's when was such and such person born, who's a member of which organization, so on. You're collecting these things, you're posting them on pages, and then schema data associated with those pages. So MUM is aimed at collecting extra dimensions, extra levels of information that's not necessarily collected in attributes. You're including images and animation and audio and other aspects that maybe haven't been included in schema for things. You can include videos, you can include photographs, you can provide descriptions of those types of things. You're moving towards a world that's ready for MUM.
Thank you. This is our last questions in our hand, but I'm telling to our attendees, if you have any other questions, we still have some time, so you can just type it. Next question from Emre. Hi, Bill. Thank you for the presentation. You have been a prominent name in the industry over the years and have a very rich experience on it. When you think of the future of Google, what are some of the changes or developments you expect for the next 10 years?
It's tough. There are more natural language processing language models that Google's using to learn about content on the web, and it's using it in different ways. We have things like MUM, where it's trying to understand the world better and be able to answer questions, and a wider range of things. It's like the examples they've given include being able to compare different types of hiking boots when you're going on a trip up the side of a mountain, to see which are potentially the best pairs to wear. They're trying to provide useful information. They had some presentations on Lambda, which is another language model based program. It was originally based on the same types of things that a previous language model, Mini, was based on, where they're analyzing chat conversations and they're learning from those. They've been using Wikipedia, and they've been using the book scanning project, where they scan millions of books, and they're use that data to train their language models. So they're building upon that for something like MUM to make it more effective, to make it better. And Lambda helps it by understanding conversations better, being able to talk in real life to real people. They're learning about things like prosody, which is inflections in language. It's pauses, it's words like and hum and so on. And when you get Google calling somebody on your behalf, they'll make it sound like they're actual human beings, because they include pauses and they include emphasis, and they're paying attention to all that prosody type stuff. They're trying to replace people. I don't know if that's a good thing for a search engine to do. I still have my card catalog for the local university. I hopefully don't have to abandon Google to start using books again.
Okay. So thank you so much for your detailed answer. I guess we don't have any other questions. I don't see any new questions. So thank you so much being with us here. So have the yeah, okay. I got a notification, but it's not a question. Sorry for my interruption. Okay, thank you so much, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.